We're really grateful to have you. So
Yeah.
UAP's with us. Drew, have you met Drew? I assume because he's the one that got us on this.
Yeah.
Have
Hey,
you?
what's up, UAP?
Hey, how are you?
Is he talking right now, or do I have to jump out?
You might have to. Sometimes we have, reboot it just in case. So,
All right, I'll be right back, guys. 2 seconds.
So, and you know Brittany yet? I hope. Have you talked to Brittany before? Brittany UAP.
I haven't talked to her before. No, it's nice
I've
to meet
probably
you.
commented on some videos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you guys are in the same place because you've been doing a lot of really important research that covers metaphysics, physics, spirituality, and science, and how it all really ties together. And Brittany's been right in the same boat, and swimming ahead of us a lot of the time. She's really a volcanographer. She's a study of the volcanoes on.
That's Vulcan amazing.
Vulcan amazing. Yes.
That's cool.
I
I just watched Dante's Peak. I don't watch movies very often. I just happened to watch that one recently.
Are you able to hear, Drew? Is it working for you now?
I hear some clicking.
Yeah, I got clicking too.
Yeah, we too.
Oh,
2 seconds. 2 seconds.
I hear you though. Can you hear us? Wait. Try. Maybe take it.
Okay.
Well, okay.
So
one more time. You should meet. I think actually Alex. Alex Flyer, a conspiracy music guru.
Hey.
Hey, UAP.
How you doing?
I think you guys did a Globebusters episode, which was pretty awesome.
Yeah, we brushed shoulders, didn't we? Very briefly.
Yeah.
We didn't get to talk to each other much, did we? But
yeah, just briefly.
Well, that we'll make amends for that. And then Stellium, this is Mike.
Mike, lean over so we can see you, Mike.
Yeah, come a little bit closer, eh?
He's doing awesome research.
Mike's been doing, looking into the biogeology of rocks. And there we go. And then now we've got Drew.
What's up, guys? Hi, can I hear everybody? Just
everybody say
quick.
hello.
Hey.
Yeah?
Hey.
Yeah. And I think I saw that there's been some
UAP?
comments on other videos. So UAP, are you there still?
Yeah.
Celia
okay.
Mike
All right,
did
great. All right. Sorry about that, guys.
Celia Mike did the video on the Hearts and the Titans, I think, and he posted all some really good stuff as well. So I don't know if you guys have connected before directly or not, but that's really cool that everyone's here.
I'm really glad that you have you got both UAP and we got Odinson, we got Alex, we got Brittany, and we got Mike all in the same place because pretty much these are all people that do stuff I don't really know everything about. So
Right. No, super stoked. And I reached out to UAP because that's who I basically started learning from, and I've been with him forever now. And then I came over to you, Andreas, and we started working together, and we've been doing a lot of photo obscura type videos and on after resets and the way that the controllers hide money and hide their estates, and the not having any photos of them building anything. And I feel like if we all came together, Brittany with her views on the reset, UAP with Christ consciousness, Tartarians, mud floods, and then Andreas just bringing in every factor, I think we can make a super great video here, guys.
Yeah, I mean, UAP, you just made a pretty interesting video. I was just watching.
Yep. Sorry.
Well, yeah. Do you want to go in a bit about what your recent research has been about? I guess. Oh.
Yeah. I don't know if you can hear me. I can't tell if it's muted.
Yeah, you're good. We hear you.
No, you're good.
Okay, good. Okay. I kept double tapping it. Yeah. It all came together how you've heard me tell my story, how it all started, where I just was like, I'm going to debunk the crap out of these stupid conspiracy theories.
Yes.
But some people are comfortable just just calling it stupid. But I thought, well, I'm going to look into it first. So going through, I made a list, just for fun, and I thought, well, I'll just share it with everybody. And, that's how the channel got started. And that's how I named it originally, just after, I didn't I thought UFOs would be the thing, but then the connotation with it. So I liked the UAP term. And Hillary Clinton had just, I don't know if you ever saw that. She was out there saying that it's going to be the new term or whatever. So I kind of adopted it. But yeah, it all comes together like you throw this stuff out there and you're waiting for somebody to come and just absolutely demolish you for suggesting that something may not be according to the official narrative. And I'm amazed how seldom it happens. Like, where are all these historians coming down on us, like, just kicking the crap out of us for
I have nothing.
for being so wrong, and bringing the evidence. It just doesn't happen. And it's just awesome how it all comes together. And that's cool that you guys can all see that. That's really,
Yeah,
like
it's
you
out
said,
the wazoo, my
it
friend.
works together. Yep.
There's no
Absolutely.
counter.
All
There's
day.
no counter argument really that's being presented. So
We've been
Yeah.
trying so hard to figure out answers, and it's funny because like when I first came on the scene, I made a couple of videos. People were like, "Wow, he knows the answers to things," and I'm like, "No, I have a lot of questions." And so I found a circumstance where there's more and more people that know, like, they're like, I don't know everything, but I happen to know everything about this because I was there, and they weren't able to lie to me about this. And the more we get those people remembering together, like, Odin's son's been getting all this stuff in Massachusetts, which is just like Russian icon libraries from probably people from Massachusetts to begin with, and it's pretty crazy. It gets pretty wild when you start to put all of these little stories together and find out what's actually happening. So that's why we kind of trying to make this thing, which is not just like my channel or his channel or her channel or any one of our channels, but it's like the Tartary study group. So we've got these different groups that study all the time on tartarynova.com, and so far we've got like so many people from around the world that are like, yes, here's what I did. I went to the library. I pulled out the books with the gloves on, It's been pretty wild just to be, and I've only been doing this for like a year almost, not even a year, right? So
and going around and taking photos of the mud flooded buildings and and just seeing that and having the other people be witness to you taking those photos, they get really excited and really involved. And that's what we found. And we found that we got more facts at a quicker rate by doing so, right, Andreas? I think that's how we've been going about it.
It's crazy, because all of us, you've been doing this a lot longer, I guess is my point. So like once we started, we were like, oh my gosh, when are we going to get to the point where we're on a level where we can even talk to you about things?
Right.
It's going to take years, but like now it's almost a year, and I feel like we're able to have a conversation finally because we've got a few things that we've got that are actually like a set thing. And you're talking to the same people that we love, like you like Martin, Flatter's British.
Of course.
Oh, yeah.
So
I email him every week.
You motivated us to research UAP to get to this place, and I found like you and Andreas around the same time, and from that I've totally shifted gears in my my self-education or what I was planning on doing, and I've even taken a break from my doctorate just for the summer, maybe whatever, just to continue with this research, because it's been, my particular area has been really interconnected with star forts and reset and mud flood and a lot of theories of non-heliocentric proofs that I haven't heard yet. And so when I dive in, I'm also really excited to be here because it's really surreal to talk to the people that have brought me to this point. It's really awesome.
It's fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's way more fun than the regular school.
Yeah. Well, and I am a teacher, so it's really, or was, I don't even know, but this is like a dream. So thank you for letting me be part of this today. Sure.
No, and thank you, Brittany, and UAP. Like, while we have you here, can you, for our viewers and all of our viewers together, finally explain photo excuria with the idea that you can have a photo, and it's being dated, but it's crystal clear and it can be from an earlier time period, and like give us an understanding of your view of that.
Yeah. Well, the way I was taught, it was like with Abraham Lincoln was the example, how he looks in photos and how he's kind of blurry. And they said, well, you have to be really still. And there are just all these things we learned. Then that would be the 1860s. But then what you find is looking back in real photographs, I don't mean the ones that are done by the official state photographers, which is astounding. Like Australia had an official state photographer way back then. You look at the other ones, and the quality goes up as you go back in time to a certain point. And the official age of photography is like around 1840, and then a few years leading up to that. So I don't know how much detail you want me to go into, but
Can I ask
reading
a
into
question
it, there was
before you go, or after you're
yeah.
done? Just
Go ahead.
you said the 1840s or whatever for photographs. Have you looked into or done a video on the stereographs in the 1790s images at all that they have?
Well,
Okay.
yeah. When I researched it, I saw that they had like the daguerreotype photos, and the arguments between them about who invented photography, and some of the earliest photographs are supposed to be like right around 1840 or a couple years before. But I was watching Martin's channel, and he stumbled on one that said 1838, and it was really clear.
I gotta get So
And
you had a video that showed, I think it was yours, showing a woman developing a photograph and how easy it was.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
that sent
I
me on a
learned.
search, and I found a 1790s image from a stereograph. So
Yeah.
I don't know where I got it. I wasn't prepared to show that, but I don't know. You guys keep talking. I'll go and look for that.
Well, yeah, I found watching like Martin's channel, you see a lot of these really amazing drawings that are kind of like the crosshatch, which is a way to print the books and everything. But
stereoscope.
but they were doing camera obscura for quite a while, and so when they were trying to figure out who like invented photography, it's not the photography that was talked about when you really get into it. And when I read it, what they actually say, it was not the fact of making an image the way you make an image through photography. What it was all about was getting the image to last.
right.
That's what it was all about. And so they had been using cameras to make images, and what they did were different techniques afterwards to burn the images into something that would last long enough for like an artist to
To a rendition.
Yeah. So what we look at that are these amazing drawings, well, they're not exactly that. There's somebody kind of tracing over it, and I don't know if it was all by hand, but it certainly was a technique that had been used for centuries at least.
Yeah. No, go, Andreas, go on. Yeah.
Sorry. There's a great documentary they just made recently by this guy who's I think he designed Light Desk and saw all these great computer graphics companies in the 80s. And his lifelong obsession was how did Vermeer do it? And what he found in his logic was he must have used a lens, and he must have focused an image through the lens and painted onto the wall in a dark room projection of that light through the lens, and then pixelated dot art, which also you can see in the Vermeer paintings. So there's so much shadow and mixed light and blending of light, but the pictures itself are all like pointillated. If you really look at the close pixelate quality of the way he painted, he was just sure of it. So it's interesting. I recommend looking into that. Like, I think it's just called Painting of Vermeer or something like that. But it has a lot of evidence that direction, that they had this technology, they had lens technology, and their hardest thing was saving the material.
Brittany, while you find that photo, can I just open up the screen share real quick?
Yeah, let me go back to that. Sorry, I was just showing this. Here you go. It's on you. Pull your screen share up. Sounds great.
All right, cool. You guys keep talking, and I'll just get set up. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I was just going to say the process itself, like how these master artists did it. it's actually superior to photography, in my opinion, just based on what I've seen in person at fine art museums. When I look at some of these paintings, especially the ones that are considered 16th, 17th century, like Dutch, that to me is the most amazing physical rendition in two dimensions mostly of a human being, because what they do in just the canvas, they're layering the paints over, and some of them have translucent qualities. So depending on the lighting and as you move your head, you can see things that they rendered, underneath the top coat, whatever it is. And one example is like a man's face where his individual whiskers have like different colors, and then they're covered over with like the skin color of the paint. And it really is more than just two-dimensional, and it's something that you just don't have in any quality photograph. I guess you could render it digitally, but it would almost nobody does that really. And that's something that was almost commonplace for a while. And then just like with photography, there's a period where the quality seems to decrease when you get into then this is all my opinion, but just impressionist, expressionist. But it's fascinating how you go back in time and it seems like things got better. Now they attribute it to the artist's skill, but it could have just been an accepted technology, that kind of got lost. And Camera Obscura would explain it pretty well. Of course, there's so much that we don't know about it. And like you said, things tie together with architecture. You mentioned how they project the image
Yes.
in the research, and it's something that you can find in architecture. They have a few, I can't think of the examples at the moment, but there are some where at a certain time of year, on a certain day, the sun illuminates the skyline and it projects an image on a wall. I think it's in the United States in one of the buildings they found, and it was intentional, the way they did it. And so there's some of these discoveries being made. There's probably a lot of it out there that's just unknown. That's just built into the architecture, and it's actually that image projection that's the same as a pinhole camera. Have you ever seen that before?
No.
Pinhole
Why don't you?
In Argentina, there's like, in Brazil, there's just hundreds of these pictures from the 1700s from pinhole cameras like that. Pinhole vintage. What your iPhone is basically based on a pinhole camera, and you get some of these really great little shots. But like, that was the thing about holding still, because the speed of the film development would have been based on the material. If the silver has chemicals in it that light uses piezoelectricity to burn away, then the dark is anywhere the light didn't hit. So you're really painting with light in that respect. So wherever the light hits, it burns away a little bit. So some of them turned out pretty strange, pretty ghostly. But then you could always use them as a basis for learning about how things work. So it makes a lot of sense that technology was very expensive,
Shit.
And so what was recorded on silver? Something that was valuable,
So I didn't know if you guys wanted to get into a little bit of Edward Sears. He was a man in Bethune, Mass, and he owned a few castles. And the really cool part is it's linked to some photo obscura, and also he was a designer for the Carnegies. And not only that, but he married into some big money in California. He married Hopkins into Mary Hopkins, and she it's kind of weird because they move around a lot of money, and obviously they're controllers. So it really sets the stage for, these castles maybe being, star forts and some hidden technologies like Antiquitech. And if you look up here, he was really into pianos and organs. And Edward Francis, I think you pronounce that Sears. How do you pronounce that, Andres? You see that? Can you see? Hello, you guys there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're just muted for a second. Searles, probably.
Searles, yeah. So this man, he was born in the early 1800s, and it was pretty much like right after the reset and the mud floods. And these are the controllers that pretty much have all this stolen land from the Tartarians. And I'm just kind of bringing you guys up to speed. And he was into this organs, and also interior decorating for these huge families. And I don't know if you guys know anything about Paul Company and the Fortunes on Fifth Avenue, obviously. And
What's the Paul Company? Is that
so they did the interior decorating for these big mansions. And you, Martin, and John Levy have talked about them having these big organs and Antiquitech and being in these homes, right? And these mansions, and them having them burned, and all those different topics around it. I figure it'd be really interesting to pull up someone that was like directly involved in that whole process.
in the original, like the supposed original design and construction, or are you talking about a company that demolishes them and disposes of them?
So the middle part of that. So I say, what I took from it is they have all these mansions, right, that are in disarray. And what they are doing is fixing them up and interior decorating. And this man right here, Edward, right, he is in the middle of that. He's going to, homes of Carnegie, Rockefeller, all the Fifth Avenue homes, and working with their organs. And he owned an organ company, and he was a piano player, so he knew about the frequencies of vibrations and how important they are to you. And he traveled to California for his health to obtain a testimonial from Mark Hopkins to marry his wife, or actually he died and then he married his wife, and that's how he acquired millions by Mary. And they moved back to Methuen, and I have photos of their mansion there. Now, what I'm suggesting is that this is a perfect story in the middle of all of these conversations. This man is hiding money. He's saying he's making these, castles in New Hampshire. He's saying he's making these castles in Methuen, Mass. He's building all these schools. Well, guess what, guys? They have no pictures of them being built. I looked in the town records, and it's just money is being just moved around, right, to clean up the mud floods, interior decorate. And so this is the man right here. And I didn't know if you guys wanted to talk a little bit about, maybe the big four, the families that lived on Nob Hill in San Francisco. And these mansions. And we can look at some photos that I found from the 1800s, and we can get into these topics. And then from that, we could possibly move on to the Tartarians and different thoughts on Christ consciousness and stuff like that.
Yeah. The first Carnegie Manor. Let me put on it for just a quick second. Carnegie Manor, they said, was built in a year. There's no photos of it being built. It's just it's basically this crazy, this is what it looked like then, this is what it looked like now. Not much has changed, except for the mud flood around it, by the way. And you look into it a bit, and they say, okay, so it was built in a year, which is crazy. And everyone who was there didn't do anything. They just helped bring things and were there to assemble. They were all low-level workers that were moving things around, except for some of these big companies that were bringing in stuff, right? So they have I forget what it is. It's like copper line ceramic tiles, so that they have like electricity that shoots through all of the tiles. The whole thing is useful for basically photovoltaic cells. Like you've got batteries built into the tiles of this place. And he only lived in it for a few years before he moved out to another place, which also says something. It's like it wasn't futuristic enough. It didn't work out the way he wanted it to.
Yeah, it's always the same story like that, isn't it? They have this amazing place supposedly built, and then within 5 years they're moving out or they're remodeling it, and nobody got to see it before. You know, that type of stuff. And the idea that they're rich, using that to explain it all. You know, it might work for some of them, but it's amazing how often that happens, isn't it?
Yeah, and not only that, you know, they had this free energy, and you know, no one can explain it. They're supposed to be just decorations, you know. And then they have these situations like 2 photos back. Let me just grab it. Where you know they'll say stuff like, "Oh, you know, this man was buried inside his." You know, his church in an Egyptian style, and it has all these different you know, decorations of you know, a different culture, and they don't explain it at all. Like, you know, who are these people? You know what I mean? Like, what, you know, who are these Tartarians? Like, they don't even mention these subjects, you know. So I just find it really kind of funny how they dance around all these subjects, especially like organs. You know, they don't talk about organs at all and how good they are for you. And here they had them in every single home, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's there are little bits and pieces you get out of it that I think about a lot. Like in so many different movies and things like that, they'll depict a guy who lives in basically what we consider now a mud flood mansion that has an organ, and he's playing the organ. You know what I'm talking about? And usually it's that toccata fugue by Bach, I think it is. But anyway, there's something magical about it, and also something kind of creepy about it in a way, strangely enough. But yeah, they all had that, and the locations and everything about those, like in those Fifth Avenue mansions, they were just perfect. And if I recall, I don't remember who did the video on the Fifth Avenue mansions, but it was really good. And I think it was Conspiracies R Us. And anyway, he tells a story about it, and they ended up just for no reason at all, just taking the organ out and just tossing it in the swamp.
Yes.
And these types of things that just don't. I still like. I don't understand that yet, because it was working fine and everything. You know, there's some mystery there.
So these pillars, can you guys see those? Right, these pillars right here. Yeah, so you know, obviously in the Masonic way of thinking, this would be Boaz and Jachin, and obviously they have like some antiquitech on the top, or they say they're just for burn, you know, big torches. But these things are massive, right? They're huge. I actually drove by them, and they have a cool story to them. Supposedly, this plot of land right here is right next to the castle, which is behind it, and it's actually in the shape of a triangle. Now, the pillars, right? They say that they bought them from New York, and New York bought them from Quincy Corey. And if you remember the video, the first video that myself and Andreas did together, we were talking about the Quincy Corey, and they had very kind of interesting photos where they had, like, you know, a giant there, and then they also had some big Tartarian statues. And I just find it really interesting that I feel this is an older photo, and I also feel that they are just buying these already made pillars by a different people. I don't know. Oh, and also the triangle of land. I'll try to find some more photos on it, but it's almost in the shape of the side of a star. And myself and Mikey, um, I'll bring up the photos in a little bit, but it looks like it was almost a star fort at one point. And if you looked at the big, gates that I was showing for a little bit, that's on the side here. And the triangle, this plot of land, after Edward bought these, he placed them here. And then I guess another man bought this land and he lost his pillars. So it's kind of a weird story where, you would think that, them saying that they bought him from New York and they're placing him here, he would own all this property. But I can't find any photos of them being in New York. And I can't find any photos of these in the Quincy Quarry. And I have tons of those. So maybe these are already existing here. And possibly this is the side to a star fort, and this is just their way of cleaning up them being here. And where did they come from? Because, like, if you look at the date that they say they came was 1855, 1865, in that period. Like, how would they move these? Things are massive. They probably weigh more than the giant cannons or machines that John Levy talked about. I mean, look at them. They're definitely over 30,000 a piece, right?
Yeah, those questions come up a lot.
And they have like torch-like tips. They're top of them, very like Olympian torch-like tips. My question is, like, what is the thing when you get two obelisks together? Do they make a stargate or something? I know that sounds kind of silly, but if you look into some of the pictures that they have, and especially in that kind of those circles, those fraternal circles, they talked a lot about Joachim and Boaz and the idea of having a world between and a world without or outside of the pillars like that. So it could be that they're useful for some sort of it sounds like more and more like trying to contact. Somebody just called it on the chat, a hotline to somebody or something. It could be that they're literally, they think that that this was something useful in terms of technology. I mean, and who's to argue with them if they are so successful at controlling everybody else? Maybe it does work. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, and however old they are with those lamps on the top, did they have electricity, or were they having somebody come along with a ladder every day, to light
The
them up?
old ladder lean.
Yeah, the oldie ladder lean and the gas lighting,
Right? Like Gabby.
So I know we're jumping through these photos in different directions, but this is another old one of his organ factory, which is right down the street from the castle. Now, if you've followed some of the photos that I've kind of put up here, this is another part to the castle. So I'm supposing, or kind of throwing out the question, was this whole area a big star fort? And was this town all connected? Was this red brick all here from the Tartarians? And that's kind of what I'll just be displaying. But it's a good question, because if you look at the corner of this picture, you see, a part to a castle, obviously. And then you see the red brick, and then you see the portholes. So it's pretty interesting,
Yeah, you have to wonder about the guy, because he was making these portable organs too, like the harmoniums. Apparently, he was a harmonium production, the Pollen Company thing. So now I have to look into the Searles guy a lot more. Methuen Organ Factory.
Yeah. It's just kind of wild, because, in this whole town, you have all these different aspects. You have the Antiquitech on Main Street. You have another, like, it looks like a newer, I'll try to find it right now, like a newer Antiquitech. But, this man, he just has all these aspects. And then not to just to mention, he has another castle right up in New Hampshire. So, like, was this man just covering up for this Tartarian empire being here in Massachusetts? And he's just another part to that story, right? So this is another thing right down the street fasces. See the fasces right on this Washington Monument in Methuen, Mass, with these huge parts to a chain link fence made by giants, for giants possibly. But yeah, I just wanted to show you some of this UAP. Figured you would really enjoy it.
Yeah, it's always fascinating how they have these monuments up before, like, the explanation or the, like the Washington Monument, for example, in DC. It was kind of like constructed up to a certain point and then stopped, right? And then like was finished something like, I don't know, 70 or 80 years later. And then well, and like Brittany was talking about with the camera obscura type drawings and things, I found some of that Washington Monument, how it originally was, and how different it was and complete it was at that height. So it's pretty clear they found it that way to me and demolished it and then just kind of created a different narrative around it. And I think some of the characters that they represent may be originally entirely different people, who are from the previous civilization.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is just the whole narrative in Massachusetts itself, like possibly, I always think maybe some of the bottom was, original when you look at these, but definitely the top being changed, that's interchangeable. And I kind of just showed a picture of that right here. See, you can see where is it? Right here. See, this is them, saying that they're making this statue, but it's obviously they're just bringing in this part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the statue of hoaxery.
Yeah. Oh shoot. So
I've since found, I did that video about the statues, and I've since found a lot of stuff that kind of supports the whole, idea that there was a statue already on the original pedestal that it's on.
Yes.
And, they just built up around that pedestal to change the look of it and plopped on the other statue that we know as Lady Liberty, who has 1 foot chained to the ground still, by the way. A lot of people don't know that, but yeah. And I expected so many people, the curator of the museum to come and set me straight, right? On these things, but it just doesn't happen. And it's amazing what isn't photographed. New York City, around the time of the construction of the Statue of Liberty, is well after the supposed advent of the age of photography. All the pictures taken in the Bronx or in just around Manhattan, the whole area, I guess they don't have anything in the background. There's nothing that anybody caught. There's a curious absence of photography, so far as I can tell. It's been half a year or something, and I just haven't received anything showing the progress of it. Just like you said, with that, it's all done. They have it on the ground. It's everything's almost always done when you see it. And you guys have found the same thing, right? I mean, I have a few examples of where they actually built something, it looks like. Half the time when I think I found that, it's actually the demolition or refurbishment of whatever the structure is. But I have found a few that look like actual, like de novo construction, just out of nothing. There's just empty land, and then they built a building. Just a few examples. But even then, that may be moving something. So it's something I'm looking for, but I just haven't found it. And I think you guys are in the same boat, right?
Absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
it seems like a lot of what we're finding, though, if you look into the statue, like exactly what Drew's been looking into, like the names of the guys who ran the companies that did the refurbishment or the installations, anything that was any company that was involved with the World's Fair, because they hired these liaison groups of people. And what they ended up happening was like people would have a rush to finish this. They'd be bringing in finished things, but then these government companies would then remove the head and put a new head or change a part of it. It seemed like that was a big thing. Is there's alteration that was going on at a certain point as well.
Yep. Definitely. So here it is. Now here's something that I found pretty cool, guys, and I think you'll like it. This is in the middle of Methuen. This is now, okay? And what you see on the top is obviously one of those like mercury balls, and like a newer style, clock. This almost looks like present day. So my question is what do you guys see? Because I've been questioning this for like a couple days now. Now, is this like newer Antiquitech, or was this you see what I'm trying to say? Like, is this still plausible? You could use this now, or is this like just it was made and then like kind of refurbished? Like, what do you see from that?
What I see is like a plausibly original roof, and
Yep.
and even an original perhaps gear system, but then it's been repurposed probably in like 100 years ago or the last 50, probably 80 to 100 years ago. Because that seems to be what they do. Is you've got this old copper roof. It's been oxygenated, so it's turned green.
Yeah.
It takes a certain amount of time, and I've seen it done. I mean, in Camarillo, there's the bell tower that's now over the Camarillo Ranch House, as a gazebo, because what else are you going to do with that thing? But it was at the top of a church that collapsed. And look at this guy's, as you pointed to the mercury ball, the lightning rod. Well, I mean, it seems like there's just too many of them not to notice that they were probably getting hit by lightning,
Right. No, absolutely. And like, you see a lot of that when you ask, people that, are just kind of ignorant towards the subject, or, they just don't want to know information on it. You kind of just suggest some of our learnings from here. What do you guys think of that? Is that just a cross, or is that just, obviously a lightning rod, and they can't see it? And like, to us, it's pretty obvious. Now, like, is there some people in these cities that are controllers still and they know about it? Like, you know what I mean? I always kind of think of that, like, well, say the public works department, one of the oldest guys there, would he know about that? Like, you see what I'm trying to say?
How much would he know, though, right?
Yeah, right.
Just enough that it came from a garage sale or from the dump. Before that, it was in something more, like a church, and then that's it. That's all they're allowed to know. It's a found feature that their wife thought was too beautiful to be thrown away. That's all they're allowed to know about it. I mean, maybe some of them know more, because especially if they're doing hydraulic, water, and power systems, you might have some guys that are still running and operating some of these older, water and power buildings that are, getting power.
I don't think it would have been too hard to assign people in the resets. So the Masons were a big part of the resetting, and when they came over, a lot of the buildings were still built, and so they claimed them and kind of reassigned them and took over the post office and various jobs that they filled, down to like, we'll get to Ben Franklin eventually, but in his role, even in like volcanism. But so I think that we have different architects that were covering up resets in different areas too. And you were covering one of the, I guess, Massachusetts resetters.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely.
That's cool. You mentioned Ben Franklin. I'm just finishing up a video on him.
Cool.
But what
awesome.
what were you going to say about him, Brittany?
Oh, he had a pretty big theory on volcanism and volcanoes and their involvement in a variety of things. I think he's responsible for some of the hydrothermal power that we're harnessing from our ocean volcanoes. There's over 1 million submarine volcanoes that are currently not active, but there's many that are active. And he hypothesized that and went out, and there's a couple of voyages of his that are not as commonly discussed, mostly because they're on volcanoes and it's a whole earth science in itself. And so these resetters, if you look at like Ben Franklin or like Tesla or all this reverse engineered or rediscovered tech, even down to Thomas Edison, we found some really cool telegraph stuff on his more modern I don't know, adaptations or his new, they just kept adding patents that were making these crazy, I don't know, crazy things capable. So I had written him off and jumped on the Tesla train, and you kind of go back and there's a lot of these things. We started looking into Ben Franklin, and it's like the whole lightning rod, kite, whatever. And he's got a whole separate theory that's actually really important and relevant to what we're kind of unveiling with this volcanism and the technology down to like our nuclear plants being set up on volcanic fault, the volcanic fault line, whatever you want to call it, the ring of fire. And yeah, there's a lot of interesting science that we're not being taught that you have to dig for.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. The unrequited interest in having some kind of a government base type of operations over something like, for example, Diamond Head in Hawaii. They've always had the inside of that crater of Diamond Head. Yeah, they've always had something going on there and had it be off limits. I mean, you can kind of tour it now, but the middle's still government.
Have you looked into the geophysical year at all? In 1957, 58? It was 12 nations uniting to, find the highest points and the lowest points of Earth. And what the result was, McMurdo Bay, and that's the nuclear plant they have on Antarctica, which is on Erebus, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but one of the Volks there. And they built 60 facilities between the 12 nations that were supposedly at odds with each other. And I was looking at World War II. I have a bunch of old books. I pretty much bought, as I was on the truth path, I bought every book that I thought had information that would be relevant at some point. And there's a lot of polar research books, military documents, people that were selling their general in the Navy or whatever. I don't know. Anyways, lots of books for sale, and I bought them all. And so it's been interesting because now I've gone back through some of them 3-4 times, and it's been mind-blowing what I know now, looking down to we have a huge maps collection of these crystalline deposits all over the Earth. Anyway, so yeah, I've been collecting these books, and now they are kind of unveiling what I was researching in deep archives. And that was the nuclear kind of setup.
Tiny, gentle nuclear volcanoes, though. I think a lot of people have a bunch of conceptions about things. So then when they find out, things aren't the way they wanted them to be, then they just think there's nothing left. I don't like to throw the baby out with the baptismal water.
No. I'm not saying I'm not.
Right. No, I'm just saying that you're right, and there's a lot of people that were listening right now. I just want.
Okay, sorry. So,
there were some comments on the YouTube that were like, I just want to make it clear, like volcanoes, even if they're not what people think they are, volcanoes to an extent exist.
Okay. So McMurdo docs, though, that was like, that's really interesting. That's a whole probably separate video, but really with volcanoes and why I think as a group became interested is because we learned about pyroclastic flows and lahars and how damaging those were. And we started studying the history of stratovolcs and super eruptions and how they aligned with even like biblical events and how the damages that are caused. And so sometimes people are essentially, anyway, I'm going to stop because I know you guys are on a different track and I want.
No. We looked over at Stellium. Mike and I just were nodding. We're like, now we're getting somewhere.
Okay. So, we learned about how that impacts, I guess, land and what happens to in different temperatures, different conditions. And that connected with these hydrothermal vents and these ocean volcs and how quickly they produce land. I think 6 days was one of the things I was looking at, and we had land coming from a basaltic ocean volcano. 7 days there was grass, or 7 weeks. So then we had trees, I think, at 23 years and a tropical rainforest by 29 years from merely the volcanism of an island. And so that was kind of fascinating to see the time conception that I hadn't really studied, because why would I know how long it takes? You assume it takes, many, many, many years to be habitable after an eruption, and that's not always the case. So we're looking into plagues. It's very connected to grand solar minimum with regard to how, I guess, the blocking out of the sun would be the natural function of the volcanoes. And I know Nathan and Mikey and Victor did a video on that. You put it up today. But so that definitely has an impact on the Earth. And though not only do the resets align with these major super eruptions, which is different than your typical eruption because it's when it's an explosion. So you have one magmatic chamber meeting another, and when these chambers meet, it's crazy explosions because we have different types of chemicals that had been contained, and so you'll get earthquakes from this. And if you don't have an earthquake, well, you'll have an earthquake no matter what, but you'll have an erupting volcano, and it will explode magmatic material. And so sometimes these projectiles can reach the upper atmosphere, whatever you want to call it, and they stay up. And these now I'm trying to track with meteor showers. And so if we can track these, or actually, sorry, fireballs. Last night I was on the actual fireball site, and it's how they're tracking meteorites before people can get them. Essentially, I think it's a and when I get to pause, I can bring up that app, but it's very significant. There's some details that explain biblical events that are, or could help explain, better explain. And I know Nathan had even, just ancient texts that he was using to explain what actually happened, because there's all these anomaly here. And then I found there's the lunar or the moon, all that data from Idaho. I should probably, if I pause, I can get some of this imagery up. But
you can get anything you want to get. I'm pretty.
All right, I'm very amateur. I don't.
I remember the first time I remember the first time I saw something I thought chemically as a reaction was a good metaphor for a flaming meteorite out of a volcano, or flaming fireball out of a volcano, which is basically, I had a chocolate Yoo-hoo drink, which was like this, had milk in it and yeast, and I took like a sip of it, and then I just left it because it tasted terrible. I don't like them. So I left for a week, and when I got back, it had exploded under the pressure in my room because I put the lid back on it and left it. And so it had this huge chocolate fermented hole in the ceiling from where it shot into the ceiling with a huge amount of pressure. And
that's pretty cool. Yeah.
But it really works. I mean, I know it sounds kind of silly because it is, but at the same time, the amount of pressure that could build in one of these things, and that's kind of what we've been talking about since the beginning. If they were using one of these things for a purpose or not. Right. When it goes off because it's closed up, if you've got rock and water and it's closed up on top, which is something that happens from it excreting the land out of the magma has dirt, oil, and composed stone. So you're creating a new shell. And when that bursts, you've got quite a pressure.
And then, so you guys are, suggesting the reset. And then from the reset, the different temperatures that could have caused what mainstream calls a mini ice age, right? From all of this, and it brings me back to the question of where did the Tartarians go, and from that, there's some other research that has been going on with some other people that are in more of like the biblical situation, and they have found different findings with the Mormons. And I didn't know if you guys wanted to kind of look at that too, because
That'd be
while
good.
we have UAP here, he's almost a scholar in religion. So if we looked at before the reset and then after, we can kind of get two different questions going, because we have, let me just pull him up here.
You're going to be talking like biblical religion?
A bit about Joseph Smith,
one
right?
of the
Who's offended by
No, I'm not offended. I was going to say I'm doing a screen share real quick as we go into this conversation that maybe if we're talking.
Do you want to?
I just while we do this thing, I just have to bring up this archive from Richard Bennett. He found in 2011 the studies on Tartaria and religion through the Mormons. So I found his thesis right here. So I just wanted to go through it with UAP while he was with us, if possible.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
so
go for it.
All right. Cool. So UAP. This is Richard E. Bennett. And he's a professor in church history, and he was at Brigham University, and religion education, and the history of Mormons. And he found what we found. He actually looked into tribes in Tartaria, and there was Samuel L. Mitchell and Martin Harris. And the New York theory. So this goes through a few different theories on the Phoenicians, Tartaria, and these are his findings. But I found it really cool because he was looking at this in 2011. So what do you think of that UAP while I kind of scanned down?
Yeah, I didn't know about it. It's pretty vindicating, I think. I haven't been sold on it being Tartarian because I think that term, we're using that term to reference whatever this empire was, but I don't know that the umbrella over the empire is actually Tartaria,
right?
Or even Phoenician. I don't know what it is. Right now I'm thinking of it as like the Eastern Roman Empire that kind of broke off early on and just doesn't get talked about, but. Yeah, that's cool to see that. And I did come across the Mormon histories just briefly, and they talked about their contact with natives and relating the oral traditions from the Native Americans about the events that whoever was the historian for the Mormons, I can't remember his name, but he said it coincided with the biblical timeline as to the crucifixion of Christ and the darkness that everybody experienced and the massive earthquakes and one volcanoes. Description of mountains. Like the one description was, I don't remember if it was the Sierra Nevadas or maybe even the Rocky Mountains or something popping up in a matter of a couple of weeks, they said. And that it was just the most terrifying thing to behold and this type of stuff. So that's from the oral traditions, the North American natives, and then ditto for the South American natives, also with the same timeline.
Yeah. I just wanted to relate to our viewers real quick. If they see this name, DeWitt Clinton, when I did my video a few weeks ago, I did it on Clinton, Mass. And Clinton, Mass is one of the towns that's named after DeWitt Clinton. So he was the governor of New York for a little bit, and he was also involved with the Erie Canal. And your friend, Andreas, the one that you spoke with, Alan, right? Was that his name? I think his name is that. Yeah, he did something on the Erie Canal. And I just wanted to say the connection that we're all kind of on the same path. You know what I mean? And as you go through these texts, you see the similar names at the time period because there was so few people from the reset, right? And people just jumped on and became, what we call the controllers. So as we go down, we can kind of look at what he found, through his studies of merging India and Asia and, the Mundus Novus, New World, early 1500s. And if you want to speak on the Mormons while I find something here that's really interesting, Andreas, because you've done a video on that also.
Yeah, I mean, I got some thoughts about the Latter-day Saints. I do think they're kind of an interesting group, and they get not enough. I mean, everyone just takes the route of saying, okay, so everything's ridiculous, and this is one more thing that's ridiculous. So why look for anything else in it that's interesting? But there's just so much there, You got a guy who died with a Jupiter talisman in his pocket, who may have had up to 99 wives, may have had 4, or may have had 3, or may have had. It's like very close to the story of Muhammad, and then you've got this whole religion that's come out of that, but it was actually a couple of them. And they started out, apparently, most of these blonde, blue-eyed people that left Missouri during the Missouri War. And so many people died in the Missouri War. It was crazy how many women and children were legally executed because of laws that were put in place because of the Missouri conflict with Latter-day Saints, because they didn't like them and they didn't want them around. So I've read some of the information that kind of shows it as an 80 years war, 20 years war thing where they don't remember exactly what happened before it. It's been going on so long. And they're connected to the indigenous tribes of like the Welsh Indians and the Nordic Indians that were living in that area.
Right.
Plenty of testimonies. If you look into any of the Lakota, the Cherokee, the Maidu, the Sioux, the Navajo. I mean, I'm only going to just start mentioning names over again if I keep doing it. But there's so many tribes that have said that they met white people that were indigenous there. And it gets really weird when you start thinking about Vinland being the first century versus 11th century, as there being the story of the deluge. So you've got Iceland. Let me pop onto the screen for a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
You were looking at what could have been going on with volcanoes, and I think we have to go back to Brittany at that point. But I just want to show for a second if the volcanoes, if there was fire in Iceland, then it explains a lot, because you've got all these places that were really, really lush, probably had forests, were probably really civilized, and then they're completely spread across with the leftovers of magma from being expelled from volcanoes. And then what you have seasons for centuries, probably, that nothing really returned to the original ecosystem that was there because it was completely burned off. And so then it becomes so cold, it actually changes everything about like what we now understand to be the weather, the real weather patterns that are working on our model that makes more sense. It seems likely that that explains more about the friction in the sky that's causing these northern lights, which, the aurora borealis could be kind of considered, right? It's like the snake eating its own tail.
Right.
Correlation then.
Well, and NASA has a bunch of stuff on other planets producing auroras through volcanism. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, and then there's that connection, because even if you don't believe in planets, like the luminaries, are associated with light emitting radios that were being sent with data. But then that makes a lot of sense about these star forts, which are getting information from these light, and they're actually the crystal radio sets, going really far out. But okay, so the reason I brought all that up was because you were talking about Mormonism. And Mormons created a thing. Well, maybe I'll just put, I don't have the screen. Let me look up the word Deseret, I guess, unless you have some pictures. Yeah, no, this is fine. We can go here. Deseret is weird because it was supposed to be the new Mormon country. I'll just go there.
Right.
They wanted first off, they wanted to not have the Sirius star. They want to have the Queen Bee star, which is like the two twin stars in the Pleiades.
Which is also, that's a Masonic symbol right there, that beehive. When you're in a Masonic lodge, that's what you have on the wall. And there's a lot of Masonic, symbols that involved with Mormons. So I just wanted to state that real quick.
It's an interesting thing that Joseph Smith based a lot of the traditions off of Mormonism. And Mormonism is sort of an alternative to Rosicrucianism. In a sense, it's supposed to be an alternative to being Jesuit because it's an everyman's kind of sport. But
Right.
they created this other thing. They're like, why be Americans when we could be Desseretians? And so the Deseret state was going to be this size. It was going to have a lot of California, all of Nevada, have all of Utah, have part of, I think it's Montana. And then this is that Kansas? I forget the rest of the United States. This is New Mexico, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado. Yeah, Colorado. Sorry. It's a good state right there, actually. So half of the west side of Colorado would be a pretty good place to be. So what they were going to have is all of this crazy land. They have a place called Zion, and they were going to put into it a culture that was going to have their own language called Desseretian. And so Desseretian, it looks like this. It's very weird.
Right.
Which it has all these zigzags and curves, and yet at the same time, it looks like kind of a Glagolic language with some Phoenician aspect to it. I mean, it's either they knew about it and they created this, which is what I kind of think. I personally think this maybe was created, but it was created based on something. And it looks to me like what they did was they took something already in existence, and then they said, okay, we're going, because that's what they believed. That's the other thing. Got to remember, the fun part of this is a lot of the time they actually believe this stuff themselves. So they say, that this came from, reading ancient tablets. And then they had to improve it a bit for modern use, but basically it's the same thing. So that gets interesting because you start looking into the Persian qualities, and you start wondering why did they decide they need to create their own culture, their own language, not speak
So
English anymore?
can I jump to my screen while you continue?
Let's go here.
You can keep going, but I just wanted to show that, he found that the races of Tartans and the Scandinavians to make up American population, that the Tartars eventually overwhelmed and destroyed the other two races over a fairly long period of time. Finally, the final battles, extermination, were fought in upstate Western New York, not too far from south of the Lake Ontario. Confident enough, his own thinking beginning the teachings and theories of his college class in the 1816 in Hyperborean. You see that right there? Hyperborean.
Absolutely.
So, this all comes together really exciting with the volcanoes and Tartaria, and my theory that the Garden of Eden, comes from up in Hyperborea with, the Nordics believing it's Yggdrasil and, Mount Meru. And, the big question is, while I have UAP here, towers to the dome, baby, like, do you believe that the Tartarians, after this war and leaving all this red brick around that we see everywhere, and I was jumping from photo to photo, do you feel that they went back to up in Hyperborea, or do you feel like they got destroyed to the point where there was just a few left, like in your South African, where you would see a couple giants hidden behind the poles? Because you see a lot of these giants hidden in these photos, and that's what where I come in is like I really see these photos, I see what you're doing. I try to find the ones that look like art, and I'm questioning every day, where did they go?
Yeah, I think it's both. I'm pretty sure about early on when it was populated, whatever happened, and it may be a number of things that happened over time, but whatever it was, the majority of them left, and they went somewhere else on the plane that we don't know about right now, or we think we know about, but we don't. And it's probably a number of places, but mainly to the north. There were an inordinate number of expeditions, they were called, going up to that area in the 1800s from everywhere in the world. And it may have been, finalizing and tying the loose ends and things from them leaving, because it may not have all been confrontational. I think it was at some point a more peaceful exit, and some of them stayed, and they were considered unusual by the people because in the photographs I look at, I can find them usually by looking at what the people in the photographs are looking at. So even
Right.
though it's a kind of supposed to be this exciting new thing, having a photograph taken, they're still, their attention is still on these giant individuals, if they are indeed there.
Giants. Or
Sometimes
there.
they're not even hidden. Sometimes they're
Right.
just, some of
They're
them are
just
just painted over, like literally painted over, and you can see them underneath the black paint. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to show this right here to the viewers, this is the American Antiquarian Society out of Worcester, Massachusetts, and you get DeWitt Clinton, and you get Mitchell, and you get all these guys that had to do with John Smith and his idea on, I guess, the Deseret, right? And they're coming together and they're having these conversations, right? And they're also planning on how to hide this from the maybe the tunnel people. So I kind of just wanted to show that they met together, not just in Mason lodges, but also this proof of them talking about catacombs and them talking about where did they go and the tribes that were left, and relating that to the Mormons. And religion, I just thought that was really cool to show. Just to state, Martin checked this out for about 2 minutes on his video the other night when he talked about the Welsh people and where he comes from, and the Phoenicians, and driving out of these gypsy people, because it wasn't just the Tartarians getting smashed, but it was also the leftovers, and they were called gypsies, and they were in all these different places being moved around, and that's where these weird tunnel people come in. And can you talk a little bit about that, UAP, while we got you here? And you can totally take me off of photo share. I could have you in my photos forever, guys, but I know someone else wants a turn. So.
Oh yeah. Well, I can just talk. I don't have a screen share, but yeah, the underground thing is interesting. I haven't looked into it as much as some of the other things for the repopulation, but I could tell from the maps, if you look up, if you just type in like Tartaria or
I could show some of your photos
maps,
if you want. If you want, I can
of the maps of Tartary. Yeah, there's if you notice.
Oh, there you go.
If you look at the northern part, it kind of gets like sketched once you get up. So I think the when they were driven back, they were definitely being driven back north, because there's land. There's no reason, if they could survey to such detail the coastlines and things and mountain ranges way inland, they definitely could have gone up a little bit further north and gotten some map detail, unless it would have meant that they get squashed, So I think that's what it was. I think it was hostile if they crossed the line. And so that line kept moving back. And yeah, in the United States, if you think about it, the Indian reservations, the Native American reservations, all on the West Coast, where we have absolute, like, abject, in my opinion, destruction from like the Yellowstone caldera or any number of things, some kind of catastrophic event that took place. And then you have, that's where the reservations are all the Native Americans were moved around. Right. And then in the whole eastern half of the United States, from the Mississippi to the East Coast, there's a handful of Native Americans. So they were all moved out. And to me, that's suspect, because you have like the older land with the buildings and all that, where there are no like indigenous natives still present, hardly any. And then out west, they were all moved around. And then you also have widespread destruction and then fewer buildings until you get to the coast. And that's where it gets interesting, like with San Francisco and everything. But but yeah, they were all. I think they were all gone at that point. And some of it may have been voluntary if they knew some kind of catastrophe was coming.
Right.
If it's like a cyclical thing, or I don't know, it could be any number of possibilities. But they may have just deserted the place because they thought they knew what was coming.
Now, do you also relate that to them getting vaccinated? Like maybe you see a lot of those photos of the Jesuits and outside of cities, and they have those masks on, and they're either burning them or they're dealing with sick people. Now, my question is, I feel like all these different parts of time that they try to spread out, I feel maybe they were closer together, and obviously it was dealing with Tartarians, but were they vaccinating them to get them smaller? Are we, a part of that? Or, you know what I mean? Where do you think vaccines came in? Because I remember you mentioning it a few weeks back.
Well, yeah, it's funny how it started because, like, one of the things is atrazine, and there's a picture I have. I don't know if I published it, but it was just like a scare thing, just like today with measles.
Right.
This person didn't have their measles shot, and it's some horror thing, and it's photoshopped. That was on the news like a month ago. Well, they had stuff going on back then the same way. They kind of use it as an excuse, like the blankets with smallpox and this kind of stuff. And I'm just not sure that I buy it. I think it's a convenient excuse to purge or to
Purge the
explain
people.
Something. Yeah.
Kind of like polio and all these different, viruses, right? Or illnesses.
1918.
Influence. And what was that other one Martin talked about? It was where it was such a bad air in France that the people, they were dealing with like so many of the bodies, and that's why they had them under the catacombs. Like so many people dead, they had like this air that was actually making them sick. Do you know what I'm talking about?
It's like pyroclastic gas. Seriously, that makes you sick, and it can, depending on the temperature, it can vaporize you, but it can also just be ingested and cause illness and death. I was looking into the influenza last night again, and how everyone died of, they said, pneumonia or lung infections, not of influenza in the close quarters. And I'm wondering now more about what went on at that time with our air and volcanism.
Well, it's just so weird because, you see, say in 1816, we're talking about the volcanoes, and, we're talking about, the air being so, sick and thick, from the dead bodies and the bodies piling up. Do you think it just had to do with the volcanoes more than just, like, say, the bodies and that aspect of it?
Well, there could easily be extremophiles, though, right? Because if you've got volcanoes that are killing everything but the things that survive it, then those things can be pretty impressive.
What was the death toll from that? Because the influenza is what, 50, 60 million?
Yeah.
1918 was supposedly the wipeout. And so if we look at, statistics of numbers of whatever citizens, people that we have, population stats from time, you get another picture too, because in the 1800s, we had a different population. So when they say this many million people died, it's sometimes misleading. And it's hard to grip how many people actually expired. But yeah, with the pyroclastic flow, it could definitely, or the gas, I guess, could definitely be linked. And that was something last night in the radio chat when we were talking about the HVAC and these systems that were designed so airtight. They may have been, my thinking, and I was trying to ask the question was, could they have been designed to block out the pyroclastic ash coming in if they were so sealed so tight from within? And did they have a mechanism that shut out the outside and allowed for some type of purification of oxygen during that time period? Because once it falls and cools, it wouldn't be, it's deadly, but it wouldn't be not as dead and deadly. So I don't know. Nathan knows more about the elements in the gases coming at people, but they vary. That's the thing. It's it's different as per volcano, as per eruption, as in the atmosphere. And was it a magmatic explosion, or was it a lava erupting? Did it reach what levels of pyroclast? How high did it reach in the atmosphere before it went anywhere else? So there's so many variables, but they're all being
I'm probably going to forget something if I don't say it also, which is earlier you were talking about Iceland. So I wanted to say Thule Society, if you saw that.
Yes.
Thule is this island. It's called the farthest most mentioned island in the Greek and Roman literature and cartography. And it's, outside this sea monster, Orca and Balena, or Velena, and then, above is another. But Thule is the island, or Thule is the island that's, not sure where it is, or maybe it's a place to the people. But you look at the technology, they've already got infrastructure in the cities. I mean, Victor Boog would have a field day with this picture. But this is depicted in 1539. This is 1936 on the side of a Greenland stamp. The U.S. military actually has a Space Force base there called Thule Air Base in Greenland. So there's multiple places they've assumed it could be. Either Norway or Greenland or Iceland, or Ultima Thule might be another one. So, this is an interesting spot because it's supposed to be where they went at one point, and then it was considered to be north of Scythia. And so Scythia plays heavily into this. And, this idea that it's north of Scythia plays into that they had to go north. But if you remember that the way it is that things are closer around the center, or the north, rather, then it's very easy to go east or west from the north and harder to do from the south. It takes a lot longer to do. So if you're up at the top, if you're at the north, then you're able to go all the way around in a circle faster. So they're able to get to all the other places. And that explains that they didn't just take land to get places, they took fast boats, which also explains why they all have the same boats, in South America, in North America, in Africa, and in the Viking world. But okay.
Right. But also the Thule Society relates to Nazi Germany, right? Because they were in the vault of Thule Society.
Yeah, and to be fair, at some point, several of the members were pretty powerful in Germany and the Soviet employees also. But the organization actually goes beyond that because it exists in the 1800s.
Right.
And so that's the other thing, is that Prussia, it was about a place called Prussia, and Prussia doesn't exist anymore. And that gets into this other thing about a stateless people that don't have a name for their home anymore, that eventually were going to create a new place, right? So they were trying to build a new place in South America. And so there's the NIMZA, which is the nationalist organization, but it was they weren't actually a nation yet. So it was just this idea someday we'll all be Bohemians, or we'll all be Prussians, or we'll all be Germans or something, Alemans, someday there'll be something. But at the time, there was nothing. So when the thing started in the 30s, 20s and 30s, they were like, this is going to be our oyster, fest. We're going to go through this, and it's going to make us really popular and famous because, the main guy's a vegetarian. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. So it would be useful to separate their, that thing, because, again, this goes back to the 1530s, right? It's not really from the 1930s. It's more from the 1530s. So, but yeah. They did use it. It's true.
So what do you think about magnetics and some of the tech that was, Tartaria? I remember you did a video on possibly the mechanics of how they had possible spaceships, or not spaceships, but flying, using balloons or not balloons. What do you call those? The
static.
Yeah. What's that?
Dirigibles,
Yeah. So have you been getting into any more of that recently, or?
Me? Or
yes.
you talking about? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've maintained that the dirigible's been a big part of probably them and even the societies that we come from, because for a long time, because they were around ever since before recorded flight. They had some kind of balloons and different things like that. There was an article in 1844 about a transatlantic crossing that is, if you look up famous hoaxes, it's at the top of the list for mainstream media. So if mainstream media today is saying that something's a classic hoax, you know, it's got my
Hokery.
yeah it's got my spidey sense going, and I'm thinking that they're just covering it up, you know.
Have you?
Yeah.
Is
Oh, go
linked
on.
to sorry, this would be kind of linked to aerostatics, which is a kind of
Yeah.
a new area that Victor was like totally unloading on, just
The other day.
the gases in the atmosphere and how that impacts what could float, what could fly, what could move, how it moved.
Right.
That's a whole sub-science, but it's again linked to the gases being erupted constantly around the Earth. So not to talk about volcanoes, but that's I was just thinking about what you're talking about and how that might be related to the aerostatics, something I didn't know was a thing.
Yeah,
Well,
like in the H.G. Wells movie, they reference like these invasions of dirigibles, and
right.
they play a big part in these kind of conflicts of civilizations and things like that.
Well, yeah, I was kind of thinking about like the Thule Society and Germany, and in the beginning, like some of the tech that they used and for warfare, and then also moving forward when they had the secret conversation with Adolf Hitler on his birthday, you kind of displayed that Russia backed off on them and kind of double crossed them, and they were up against another technology that they didn't even have, and they were already kind of prepped for that. And I felt like you were kind of saying that Germany was fighting possibly another people, maybe the Tartarians, and them having over 30,000 tanks and them not being prepared for it. So I didn't understand kind of who they were fighting in that conversation. If you could kind of give us a display on that real quick.
Well, yeah, it's this secret conversation with Mannerheim, and it's his birthday, and they did like this secret recording.
Yep.
And in the secret recording, you can hear sometimes they really talk quietly. And
I hear something. Maybe someone mute their microphone because there's some sound that's going through the system.
That's better. Yeah, so maybe it's feedback. That's
I'll mute
weird.
mine. Oh, it is mine. My goodness. Let me get to my hangout. Duh.
Let's see. Well, anyway, they had when they got quiet, it's really hard to tell, but just the way the conversation moved, it appears to me to be a possibility that it's a staged thing. Hitler's role was to have the war, and what he did, though, was the way he talked, at least, was that he was trying to do something different than what he was supposed to do. Now, who's he talking about? Because he said, "My people are with me on that." So I don't know who's ordering him around.
Right.
And
so are you supposing that, obviously, he was fighting for his, maybe Tartarian, or, the other, he was a part of another tribe, right? Their people. And that's what he wanted to bring back. And that he was up against, was it up against them, or they were giving him information to how to move and make this war happen, and it didn't happen the way they wanted?
Well, it seemed to me like he's fighting the other, like, kids, you know what I mean? And then whoever this other civilization is, they were stepping in later on and saying, "No, you can't win this way. This isn't how it's supposed to go." And they bolstered Russia, is what it seemed like to me.
Yeah.
And Mannerheim, being closer to them in the north, didn't want any part in trying to take them on, because he didn't think they could win.
So that's how they got kind of double crossed, or the whole transition of the war after that point, right?
Well, there's like amazing weather stuff that happened.
Yeah.
And
because
it's
they were like prepared for like winter storms, and obviously they weren't, and they kind of came out of nowhere. So that was obviously weather tech.
yeah, they had in France they had too much rain, and then in Russia they had extreme cold, and the Russians had way more tanks than they thought would even be like possible in the game, in the scheme of things, right? And those tanks were able to function in really cold weather, and that's not something that he thought he could fight against, and in fact he couldn't. And so they also had no interest in the oil field that they possessed. If they would have destroyed that, then the Germans wouldn't have had fuel to keep fighting. And so it seemed to me like Hitler thought that they were given the fuel to keep fighting, but that they couldn't win, and that he thought he could kind of force the situation, but the Russians, or I guess it was the Russians, right? The communists, they called them the Bolsheviks, that they were being supported, and then so were the Americans from some other unnamed source, that I interpret as possibly being this like a breakaway type civilization, or what we were thinking of, whatever's up north.
Right. So like possibly the other realms step in at some points, right? And that's been on the table for a while, that whole conversation. And that's kind of like one of my favorites, and that's what I've been wanting to get into, is possibly, like I said, where did they go? Who's this other influence? Where does money go on, some of the subjects in the mainstream, like possible tons of billions of dollars going missing? And like, I kind of always relate it back to, there's this, very advanced society right outside of our realm. And if that's true, right, everything else comes into play with, it being so exciting, being on the biblical terms, like, a lot of people don't realize, or in my belief, that, we're still so close to when, Christ, obviously got, crucified, or that whole situation. The 12 tribes of Israel weren't lost. There's this other civilization. So, all of this reset just happened so recently. Now that makes me really inspired with the whole Christ consciousness topic, and all of us waking up at the same time. Now, say, that's on your mind. There's other people that talk about, like, say, the flat earth back in the 1800s, right? And they've always been on the cusp of these conversations. A wave of people wakes up, and then, obviously the demonetize of the conversation happens, either, due to a fire destroying, say, a library, or some of these big events that you've shown, the people coming together, we have all this new technology, the tunnel people, and then it's like, boom, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's gone. It's eliminated.
Yeah, I believe that there was a worldwide network of some kind of communication, and probably like radio broadcast type stuff, that allowed them, even in Solomon's time, to be able to communicate over the known earth, or the whole earth, definitely in the time of Christ, because of just so many things that are said about that. You don't hear a retort, well, there are lands we don't know. How is the message going to go out there? It wasn't an issue. It wasn't a question. And there seems to be this concerted effort to make it seem like there was like no knowledge and no communication or anything of between different parts of the world in earlier times. And it's obviously made up crap when they have the Columbus and these different stories that were told, it begs the question, what are they hiding? And for me, it's that communicative aspect that kind of makes the biblical, like the disciples and people from those times, seem silly when they say, oh, we're going to take the message in this generation across the whole earth.
Right.
Well, you can laugh and say, oh, well, they didn't even know, come on, guys, but in reality, they probably actually did it.
They probably didn't
really
know.
fast.
Right.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these old 1800 photos, we see like communication towers, and they'll have like no wires, or in a different sense they'll have like a ton of wires added. So with that communication that people don't think they had, and we know they had, what do you think of those towers? Or some people like to call them Tesla towers, some people like to call them all different types of things, but like, what do you think of them?
Well, like Brittany was talking about with the lightning rods and Ben Franklin. I like to kind of laugh about Ben Franklin and joke about him being credited with inventing electricity. But it's actually that he discovered electricity. But even then, I think the truth is actually closer to him inventing the story of electricity, being part of that, and that it goes way back. And the towers, if you look at
like a tower to the dome.
Yeah, towers to the domes. But if you look at the like a police station or a fire station, they have those radio antennas.
Yes.
You look at the proportions of that and compare that to what you see in these really old photos. It's exactly the same. And so that's why I think that's what that is. Plain and simple.
Right. Absolutely.
And also it could be shortwave for long distance as well.
So just to show one of the last photos of this property, this is a tower and this is a dome, and that's in Tiquitech. And, this is Sears Castle. And there's a part that's burnt down. I do not have the photo. I apologize. But myself and Mikey, we think that this was part of Starfort, and this is one of the main towers in the middle, and it's pretty cool. If you guys look at that, it's stacked. You know what I mean? Like, this is an amazing property. UAP, I'm pumped that you came on. Andreas, you there?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. I'm super stoked to be doing this. I also was thinking UAP. I hope you come back also soon we can do some more stuff. Anytime you'd like, we can do some stuff on for some slideshow stuff you ever want to show.
Well, thanks. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
If we could possibly do one more on giants next time, or maybe like giants made by giants type of objects and finds.
I definitely think that's coming. There's been a guy who's been talking to us for a while now who's into the Giants Tartaria thing. So it'd be really good to check out, some stuff and talk to him as well.
UAP, before I go, can I throw one more image at you real quick?
Sure.
Epic.
Share my screen, Andreas.
Here we go.
Just as
is your screen on? Yeah.
Hold on 1 second. Sorry, guys.
Yeah,
I'm off there. All right. Is it on you now, or Brittany?
Everything's on screen. Everything's on Brittany's screen.
Okay.
All right.
You might want to close your chat window.
Oh shoot.
It'll be okay.
All right. So this was just one thing that's interesting. I think I have feedback coming from somehow, but just some of the names of our volcanoes, but that's for later. I just wanted to show the image of the ring of fire that now it's gone. Great. That were commonly shown. And this is why I took such an interest, because this isn't the typical map that we're shown. And if you look for the ring of fire image, you're always going to get this projection of the map, and you're going to get the United States in the east. And then if you look at either let's see, this is a flat earth ring of fire, you'll get almost what it would be a firmamental, or whatever, I don't know what you want to call it. a outer ring instead of an inner ring. And that's also, if you look at your strato volcs, the most powerful volcanoes, if you put the United States in the west, you're going to see this as an external ring, which is fascinating, because why then is the Ring of Fire map always being projected on in this manner? We have, I hope it goes right to this image. I don't know if I can stop sharing my screen, but I had one other image I wanted to make sure that Mikey got me from, I think it was Static in the Attic's video, and I won't be able to find it now, I bet. But that was that earthquake, the quake fault line. That was also a
nice shirt.
an interesting image. What was that? Oh, I was getting photographic data. Anyway, so just something to look into and consider when we're looking at the systems that are working.
Yeah,
and
that's brilliant. I never thought of the Ring of Fire, what it would look like on a flat map.
Yeah,
Really
or
fascinating.
a typical Mercator projection.
it is fascinating. Very cool.
Yeah.
It makes so much more sense how close things are all of a sudden in the north. The north is really just everywhere.
And so
Yeah.
this is just kind of
It's where the
why
party's at.
Yeah, I was just gonna say where the planes always cross and they never, like really enter, and this is their pathway, right? Like that's kind of like their trajectory is always around that Ring of Fire. Isn't that right, UAP?
Yeah, there's a lot more activity there, and then in the south, everything's more sparse, including fault lines and earthquakes
Mhm.
and volcanoes, maybe.
They have a lot of the
Probably.
studies on the earthquakes of specific to volcanoes, and they measure the different parts of a volcano, and as they start to prepare to erupt, how the earth shakes and quakes. It's pretty interesting. So a follow-up video on this would be incredible if that's something that
Yeah, that would be awesome.
but there's a lot, and we haven't even gotten to Ben Franklin, so that would have been sweet.
Hey, UAP, you check out the shirt?
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, thank you, man. I'm pretty happy that you sent it out to me. So
Yeah, next time I'm in Boston, I'll check it out. Or where I don't know where you are exactly.
yeah, writing Clinton, Mass. Absolutely.
Clinton, Mass.
Anytime.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, anytime you guys want to come out, it's open to you guys. I can show you definitely around some really cool areas. And there's some more subjects I want to cover, like catacombs or tunnels that are all through Worcester, Mass and Boston, and they all pretty much connect, and it kind of goes along with the trailways, the trains, and some of the subjects that you guys have covered, like tunnel people, and also train children or foundling children. So definitely, UAP, we need to link up. And Andreas, always the man.
Thank you guys so
I'm
much.
so nervous. Thank you for talking to us. I'm a super fan.
I know, me too. That's why I kind of jumbled around a little bit. I gotta admit. So
You made it work. We'll do it.
Well, I'm glad to be on, guys.
Yeah,
absolutely.
very nice.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Go to Tartaria.
Absolutely.
Tartaria.
take
Go
care.
Tartary.
Peace out.
Towers to the domes.
Towers to the domes. Kick.